Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So this video is about what has happened here. Why is America such a conservative place? Well, point number one, I'm going to do this off the top of my head, is that there's a thin line between a corporatist and a conservative. They're basically the same thing. They want to conserve white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy, right? It is not just the Jews doing what they're doing. There are people who are best described as white, Jewish, and LGBT, those three groups. Okay, this is key here. So it has to do with who's in what culture and doing what and why. And that's why I bring up the race so often. I'm not a racial supremacist. Point number two, a lot of these people on the right wing and in the corporations, they're part of the military industrial complex, historically, what have you. So when they looked at the left and they said to themselves, you know, what are their bases of operations, right? California is way up there, LA, okay, the Bay Area, Seattle, Atlanta, New York, and they became very active in those regions. And since there's a thin line between there's a thin line between a right-wing white person and a left-wing white person, but there's definitely a very thin line quite often between a right-wing Jewish person and a left-wing Jewish person. So a lot of these kind of arrogant people you see in Santa Cruz and in San Francisco and various places, they're actually very conservative. They're not some kind of well-meaning liberal Jew, they're conservative. Okay, and I'm not trying to start some kind of, Jewish witch hunt here, and a lot of people are into witchcraft, mind you. So if I was, it would make some kind of sense, and it's not funny, I'm just kind of explaining this, but that's a part of it. So as they went after the strongholds, they scattered the flock, so to speak, not the Christian flock, but the liberal flock. People who have a certain, people who are open-minded. And one thing they focus on in the military is psychological operations, right? Controlling moods, sentiments, and behaviors and emotions. So they said who thinks what and why, and they've gentrified them based on that, almost more than race, or perhaps more than race. And so a lot of these people went into other states and are being forced to assimilate into very racial cultures. Like Michigan, for example, is considerably more racially divided than California. Okay, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, South Dakota, Florida, you name it. Idaho, these people went to places where people aren't so liberal. Some people vote left, but they have a lot of conservative beliefs. And again, how will I define a liberal as someone who's open-minded? It's for individual rights. Not somebody trying to force you into their culture and canceling culture. That's a conservative. Those people who are doing on the left, they are conservatives. They are crypto-conservatives. And again, the main corporations we have here in America are run by people who are in white cultures, people who are in Jewish cultures, Zionist, AIPAC affiliated, what have you, and people who are in LGBT cultures. Hollywood, the tech sector, the sex industry, you name it. The clothing industry. There's lots of these guys everywhere. So that is a key part of this. They're taking a sort of military approach. That's why there's these military psychological operations. And as they reached a sort of critical mass, they decided to move a certain way. Speaking of that, leads me to my next point. We're on point number 3, I think, where they've been controlling breeding for a long time, not just during slavery, but also, during segregation, Jim Crow, the slave codes extended into Reconstruction and afterwards. And so during, say, the 50s, leading up to the sexual revolution, they were moving a certain way that made it so they were like, okay, it was time for them to do their sexual revolution, their gay revolution, the civil rights movement. It happened at the same time. But who was running these operations? They were conservatives. Look at the history of COINTELPRO. They had thousands of informants in movements that are described as left-wing movements. When the government is running who's running the movements, when they're controlling it to that degree, they're basically conservative movements under the guise of a left-wing movement where they're trapping anybody in those movements that is actually somebody who's best described as a liberal and not somebody who kisses the governing class ass as a complete fucking coward, which is what it means to be a conservative, right? Conservative, white supremacy, church rapes, you name it. Some of these guys might not like child molestation, but that's absolutely to a T, a huge part of conservatism is conserving pedosodism, child molestation. The reason why it's such a huge problem is because people want to maintain the system whose consistent output is this ridiculous degree of child molestation. And as they spread it around the world with their churches and other groups, okay, they say, well, what about this country? They have a problem with it too. Yeah. After you colonize them into next week and build all kinds of kid-pushing churches, who would have thought? Call it a hunch. Just in. Okay. So as they bred a bunch of crypto whites, crypto Jews, crypto LGBT on the patriarchal level. Okay, because my patriarchal line, you know, I'm part black, part white. You started seeing people's genes kind of change. They start looking more like Greeks. They start looking more like white people, less athletic, more, you know, like Jews. Okay, crypto Jews, and they've put them all over social media. And again, I don't care about someone's racial makeup, but what they're doing is very, very, very wrong, very sick, very petty, very disgusting, very intolerable, very unforgivable, horrible, evil, malicious. And so that is a very key part in what's going on here. So these points you must really understand and must really grasp them. What is the answer? The answer is to rally to me the solution, the soul you shun. Everyone and their mom's been playing the stupid Masonic game, the stupid fraternity game. They've been working angles as controlled opposition. That's how we got into this mess. That's how you forsook your family and your offspring. That's not how you helped them. That's how we got into this mess. The answer is the solution, which is the soul you shun, the Son of God you shun. That's me. Rally to me.